Oh, hi everyone. Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Washed Out album, Paracosm. Washed Out is the solo pop music project of music producer Ernest Greene, who gained widespread attention across the music blogosphere in 2009 via some songs from his Life of Leisure EP. And not only did the songs on this EP have a smooth, psychedelic, sexy, dreamy vibe to them, but a lot of music fans were labeling this aesthetic that Ernest was going for as being a new genre entirely, chillwave. And while I did find the album he followed up that EP with to be kind of dull at points, I definitely saw the appeal. I think Washed Out is maybe the only chillwave era artist who actually stuck to his guns but was actually able to mature the sounds that he was working with some more interesting instrumentation, better sound quality and production. I think the only point where this album really lacked for me was in the songwriting, which had a serious sameness quality to it throughout the LP, though the grooves on this thing were great. Now, as far as Paracosm goes, I would say that Washed Out's strong points continue to be strong points, and weak points continue to be weak points, really. Though I would say on this album, in comparison with Washed Out's last full-length LP, there is more attention to melodic detail and instrumental detail. I would say there's more instrumental diversity on this thing too. In a lot of ways it feels like Washed Out as usual, and yet there are spots where it feels like he's pursuing some different musical ideas but trying to capture them in this washed out aesthetic. Like on the first full-length track off of this thing, It All Feels Right, with these upstroked acoustic guitars, it totally has a reggae vibe to it. Even the percussion feels subtly tropical at points. I think the only thing hiding this influence a little bit is just how hazy the song is and the very blatant psychedelic pop influences, especially coming from the string melody on this thing. The sudden break in momentum that the song hits after the verses, it's kind of this slow, syrupy chorus. While I don't really care for the sudden transition, I do like the contrast of these two parts of the song. Overall, it's a great track to kick this thing off. Even if overall the vocals do feel a little too subdued for me. Yes, I do know that at this point, this is Ernest Greene's style. This is most likely what he's going to continue delivering on subsequent albums. Still, for the length of an entire album, it doesn't convey much of anything to me other than this sense of listlessness or bliss. There are points where I do feel a little underwhelmed by the lack of surprises being presented on this thing, like the track Don't Give Up, which is a nice piece of Balearic beat if we're going to look at this thing from a percussive standpoint, and the melody on the chorus here is pretty nimble too, a lot busier than what you'll usually hear from Washed Out. But in terms of the verses, the groove, the vocal melody, it all feels eerily similar to something he had done on his previous album. However, the track Weightless to me is one of my favorites on here because what's happening here to me feels like kind of a rarity from Washed Out. It is an honest-to-God ballad, with the vocal melody really leading the way on this thing as opposed to the beat. The very slow, spacious drum machines and synth arpeggios on this track had me feeling like I was listening to this syrupy piece of new wave. I know Washed Out has always had a very prevalent 80s music influence going on in his tracks, but this is the first time where I feel like I'm hearing a sincere recreation going on here, as well as the song Fall Back, with these very tight 16th note hi-hats, just a very busy beat on this song, and this vocal phrasing that really reminds me of Bernard Sumner. There are tracks on here that I really enjoy, highlights, just like the previous few Washed Out releases, but again, there are tracks here that I just feel like do nothing for me or have this real kind of hollowness to them. Tracks that I just wish had a bit more body to them, a bit more detail. The song All I Know, for example, for all intents and purposes to me sounds like the soundtrack to a car commercial. Nearly every sound in this song has no personality to it. If it wasn't for the hazy effects and the vocals, I would have never guessed this track was from Washed Out. The very gentle piano arpeggios and the basic root note bass lines playing out this A, E, D chord progression, it's boring. I feel like the track's one chance to redeem itself came around the solo or the interlude that was placed in there, which has, I'm not sure, I can't tell if it's a horn or it's a string or it's just some MIDI instrument. Either way, it just plays a handful of do-nothing notes that really have nothing behind them. It's like they were randomized. I think the closing track on this LP has a similarly basic vibe to it too, that keeps what could have been a pretty good song from being an interestingly detailed or layered, beautiful piece of music. Again and again and again, Washed Out misses out on making some good tracks because the effects kind of take hold and the music really sits on the back burner. Again, Ernest Greene excels when it comes to creating vibes, moods, and dishing out grooves. If those are your primary focuses, if those are your primary interest in music, then forget what I say and get this record. Because there's definitely some better production and a better sound set and an interesting array of influences going on with this LP, from psychedelic pop to Caribbean music and dream pop, as well as synth pop and new wave. However, on the musical side of things, there's just not enough diversity on this LP, really, and these very subtle changes in influence and instrumentation just aren't enough to keep this album from feeling a little monotonous. I'm really kind of feeling a strong 6 on this thing. If you've given it a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. This review is my opinion. If you don't like it, here's a straw. I want to give a shout out to Flying Lotus and Eclectic. Only the strong subscribe. All mistakes were intentional. Anthony Fantano, Washed Out, forever.